Okay, it's the end of the session. This is the Murphy dog, and Ollie is down there on the floor. All right, so basically this is their roadmap to success. So the dogs basically, they're good dogs, but I think that the humans, like a lot of my clients, have created a situation where they really didn't have a lot of rules and structure, and as a result, they got confused and thinking that they had the same same authority level as the humans. A lack of rules tells the dog that you are peers, and if a dog sees you as a peer, then listening to is optional. But if the dog is able to tell you what to do, barks at you when you do some things, or jumps up on you, whatever, and you do it, then we're not peers anymore. I tell the humans what to do and they do it. I'm up here and the humans are down here. And so now I definitely not only do I not need to listen to them, but in a lot of situations the dog gets the perception that they need to be in charge of you, protecting you or directing you, things along those lines. So I started off the session by talking a little bit about exercise. These are not super high energy dogs, but we went over some creative forms of exercise. I'd like the guardian to be proactive when it thinks about exercise. All dogs are great athletes. These dogs are really in their prime. They're about 6 or 7 years old. For dogs their size, they're definitely in their prime. They need a good hour's worth of exercise every day, but it's best done sprinkled in small spurts throughout the day. So I went over using what I call the doggy stairmaster, scent games, playing fetch. Remember when you said play fetch? As you throw it, you say fetch. When the dog picks it up, you say fetch. And then when you give them the treat, you say fetch. So that associates all three of those together. When the dog is in a mood, they bring you a ball or something in the house and they want to play fetch. Try to stop what you're doing and do it, but say it those 3 times. Eventually you can play fetch outside, or you drop the ball down the stairs, kind of a fetch version of doggy stairmaster. I'd also like the guardians to switch. Right now they are free feeding the dogs, which means that food is in the bowl all the time. This is a problem for a lot of dogs, but especially in a case where the dog is a potential resource guarder. Because when you have a baby that's crawling around, if the dog goes over or just sees the baby crawling towards its food, that could cause it to run over if it's in resource guarding mode and attack it. And we definitely don't want to have that. And resource guarding is not labeled as an aggressive behavior, because once you remove the resource, the behavior is gone. Well, in this case, we're not going to actually have the resource available. So after mealtime, we're going to pick up the bowl, we're going to dump it empty and leave the empty bowl back down, so that there's nothing to guard. Some dogs will guard the food bowl, but I don't think that's going to be the case here. If it is, then message me and we can go over it. But the method above, you could use the same thing, whether it's a food bowl or empty food bowl or bone or anything else. Okay, so let me see what else. On walks, remember, let the dog sniff. I think the walk that the guardians are taking right now is too long for these dogs. It's about a mile. And I would rather have when we go think of a walk, we really want to let the dog sniff. When we have to complete a circuit around the block or around whatever it is, we have a completion rate, and so that we want to stop the dog from sniffing or lingering to check things out, because that slows down our process of getting back home. But the sniffing is really what we're looking for. It burns more energy than walking. It is stimulating, it is relaxing, it's comforting. And so there's about 4 things that happen when we let dogs sniff on a walk. So instead of walking, say I'm going to complete a circuit, I'd rather just say, if I have 15 minutes, I'm going to walk for 7 minutes down the road this way. My buzzer goes off and I cross the road and I walk backwards for the other 7 minutes. You might only make it 2 houses and the dog might be sniffing like crazy, but you've taken out your emotional baggage about trying to complete the circuit. You're just going for a duration. And so you're going to find you're going to be able to kind of relax your brain a little bit, and it's going to be more helpful and beneficial for the dogs. So scent games, Google that, because there's a lot of things for that, a lot of variants for that. If you need help on the doggy stairmaster, message me. I have videos for that. I'm happy to share with you. All right, we also talked about, and last thing, remember, different amount of exercise might set the dogs up for success for different activities. So maybe before they harvest the corn, we need a certain amount of exercise. Before a guest comes over, maybe we only need, maybe before the corn, and maybe it's 15 up downs on the stairs. Maybe before a guest comes over, maybe that's 7 up downs on the stairs. Maybe before we vacuum, 5 up downs on the stairs. Before we practice the resource guarding exercise in a 6 or whatever it is. So play around with the quantities and also the different times of the day. Hey, buddy. And until you get to the point where you found the right, what I call the Goldilocks amount. And once you have the Goldilocks amount, then the dogs will come over, and then you really come up with the mechanism to set them up for success. Okay, let me see, what else did we go over? We also went over rules and dog psychology. So remember, when it comes to dogs, anything your dog is doing when you pet it is what you're specifically rewarding it. So if you pet a dog who's barking, you're going to make it bark more. You pet a dog that's jumping on you, it's going to jump up more. So one of the things the guardian mentioned during the session is when they come home, the dogs are both jumping up on them. What I do when a dog jumps up on me is I freeze and become boring. I wait for the dog to jump down. When it jumps down, then I tell it to sit, That was a roly-poly. We tell the dog to sit, and when it sits, then we pet it and reward it for sitting. So if you pet it when it jumps up on you, you're petting it for jumping up on you, and also it's problematic because for dogs, jumping up on a human when they arrive is akin to claiming them, and so that sends a confusing message. Sit. Sit. All right. So just freeze when you come home and your dog is there. Almost got you. I'm trying to get Ollie up here, but he's quick. But when you come home, just kind of ignore the dogs, wait for them to settle down. When they get excited, reach for them. When they get excited, pull your arm back and continue what you're doing. So this might take several practices. It's I don't know if I'm going to post above, but it's kind of like the version of waiting at the door that I did when I first arrived. So we break the activity down in the easiest version possible. And then we make the easiest version of the situation possible. Then we break it down individual steps and practice the first step over and over and over again till the dog's behaving the way we want. Only then do we go to the next step. This is how we teach them. Let me see. So for the other things, other dog psychologies. When it comes to dogs, good attention from us and bad attention from us is pretty much the same thing. Additionally, anything a dog does in your presence that you don't specifically disagree with is looked as having your seal of approval. Now, dogs go through life probing to see where the boundary limit is and who the leader is. The leader is the one who enforces the rule for that particular department. So if we don't have a lot of rules, like I said earlier, the dog sees us as a peer. Dogs probe, wondering, when are we going to stop? When I get to the right point, the edge, the human will correct me, and then I'll back away and I'll come and try it again. And if the human's consistent enough times in a row, then I'll learn that that's where the boundary limit is, and I won't try to cross it. But when we're inconsistent, that is one of the reasons why dogs keep on probing, because we're not giving them the same pushback at the same time. Okay, so let me see what else. Barking, demand barking. They're both the demand barkers. And the demand barkers, the two things the book says for demand barking: no furniture, no free pets. So we talked about both those things in the session, but the demand barking is just a temper tantrum, essentially. Give me what I want. And they just keep on barking until they get it, or until they learn another behavior will achieve it, and we'll talk about those in a minute. So let me see. Rules, remember, are not mean. Rewarding or enforcing a rule does not make it mean. Rules themselves are not negative. And rewarding a dog by breaking a rule is extraordinarily confusing, because it's going to cause the dog to want to try to do that thing again. And we're thinking, I'm just giving this one-time pass just for being a good dog. But the dog's like, but you let me do it yesterday. Why can't I do it again today? Murphy, come. Murphy, come here. Murphy, come here. See if we can get him back over here. All right, there you go, Murphy. Come. There you go. There you go. And you're missing out there. There you go, Ollie. Come here. Yeah. All right. So we also talked about, we talked about rules. For dogs, rules are typically enforced by the leaders. And so if we don't have a lot of rules, it's hard for the dog to see us acting like a leader. Come here, Ollie. And so the more that we have rules, the more the dog is going to see us, experience us acting like a leader, then they're more likely to want to listen to us. Ollie. Ollie. There you go. Come here, buddy. They're tough. So in this situation, we have one dog. We have Murphy, who's a little bit more confident, and then we have Ollie, who I don't want to say is less confident, but he's kind of more passive. And so we want to kind of make sure that we're not, now that I think about it, it didn't occur to me until now. A lot of times we have the more assertive dog. They're the ones that get all the attention. The other dog kind of starts recusing itself and having more and more distance in the background. And so because of that, we want to make sure, if you ever do notice that Ollie's back there and Murphy's right here, sometimes the more proximate dog is actually blocking the other dog from accessing. So if that's the case, make sure that you do recognize that and create a situation where you have Ollie come forward so Ollie gets that reward as opposed to Murphy all the time. Let me see. Also, don't always be fair and make sure you give both dogs a treat. I pull out a treat and say, come. Whoever comes first gets the treat. Whoever comes second doesn't get a treat, unless they give me about the same effort. Sit. After a while, the dogs now have a motivation to want to listen to you and to be the first, because the first is what gets the reward. And if they give you the same effort, then I tear the treat in half and give each dog a treat. Okay. And if you're petting one dog, the other one dog comes up, don't pet them both. Wait for that. Pet the first dog as much as you want, and then turn and pet the second dog with your full attention. Don't try to split it, because then you're letting the second dog steal from the first dog. All right, let me see what else. As I adjust my camera up a little bit. Let me see, rules that we talked about. First rule we talked about is not allowing dogs on the furniture, nor are those X mats. You need one for each cushion, and I know they're about $10 a piece, so it might be 50, 60 bucks, but it really is profound. So I'd make sure that you are feeding the dog, or that the dogs are not allowed on the furniture, and these dogs are allowed up here. So that's not, if your dog's sitting at the same height as you, we're saying we're peers. When the dog sits up here, it sees itself as having superior authority than you. And that can create other problems like this man barking or augment them. So, or this whining and whimpering. So I would say no furniture for at least 90 days. And then after that point, if the dog's other behavior problems are taken care of, then you can let him on the furniture. It's a one-time pass and only for good behavior. But be careful about doing that. Don't do it as a reward. And when I say only good behavior, I mean if I let the dog on the furniture and start barking, it would lose the privilege for barking. That's what I mean about the behavior. But don't reward it and just say, oh, you sat so you can be up on the couch. Now, after a certain period of time when the dogs are no longer resource guarding and none of these problems are still going on, at that point, if you want to allow the dogs on the furniture, it's up to you. But make sure you remember that if the behavior recedes, you can always take away those privileges, but it's harder to take them away as it is to give them. So be pretty sure the dog is stable before you look into relaxing rules and structure. All right, so the rules to be in place 90 days minimum, or as long as the problem's still going on. And so the first rule I suggest is the furniture. So, at the same time, I usually condition the dog to go to the dog bed on command and come up with a command word for the dog bed. If you want a video on that, let me know. I'm happy to share that with you as well. Other rules, not be allowed in the kitchen when we're preparing food, not be allowed around the dining room when we're eating. I would maybe come up with some sort of circle around the baby's high chair, same sort of thing. They're not allowed to go in there when the baby is eating. And you can also search for high chair on my website, and I'll have a video that shows how you can establish that invisible boundary that I showed you in your kitchen, but you can do it with a high chair. All right, so we also talked about pre-max. Pre-max are really, it's a principle. It means that a less desirable behavior will earn you a more desirable behavior. So for example, if I go to the door and I tell the dog to sit one time. If it sits within 2 seconds, as soon as it sits, I fly the door open as my reward. If I tell the dog to sit and it does not sit within 2 seconds, then I would walk away and sit down in the nearby area, wait for 1 minute. After 1 minute, go back and tell the dog to sit again. If it doesn't sit this time, I'll walk away for 2 minutes before sitting down before I come back and say it again. And I only say it once, and they have 2 seconds. Now, pre-mac means a less desirable behavior earns you a more desirable behavior. So if I sit at the door, my humans open the door and let me go outside or inside, whatever the case may be. So you can do this with feeding, with the leash, attaching the leash before you get in the car, out of the car, in the backyard, out of the backyard. There's a lot of different opportunities. So the more that you do that, the more the dog gets in the habit of practice of listening and having to offer a tribute or behavior as a way of getting what they want. And then that helps with their mindset shifting into a follower's mindset. Let me see. God, what else was I going to go over? They're scratching at the door. This will stop the scratching at the door. This will get them to sit at the door. We also talked about petting with a purpose and passive training. Petting with a purpose is if I want to pet the dog or the dog wants me to pet it. So if the dog comes up and nudges you, it's telling you what to do. If you pet it and you're validating, yes, when you tell me what to do, I listen. So next time a dog comes up at you, barks at you, nudges you, or whatever it is, give it a counter order to tell it to sit or to lay down. If it's already sitting here, tell it to sit here or here or here. So it has to change its state to get your attention. After a while, the dog will recognize, I can't tell the human what to do anymore. I have to ask. And better than ask, I have to pay them for the privilege of their attention. And I pay for it through a currency of obedience. The dog will start coming and sitting in front of you to prepay for attention. When it does, make sure you pet it. When petting, remember, try to pet under the chin. Never pet here. You pet anywhere in the body you want except for here. But if all things are equal, pet here because that facilitates that nose up, and that's a good positive body mechanic. After a while, and then use the watchword of paycheck if you suspect someone's petting without a purpose. So if they're petting without a purpose, you come in the room and see that I'm petting one of the dogs, you say, paycheck, I stop petting, even if I did it right. Tell the dog to sit. If it sits, I pet it on its chin, say sit, and then I say, I actually asked the dog to sit, and when you came in the room, he stood up, and I continued petting him, but thank you, because I do forget to pet without a purpose. And even if you want to pet the dog, you still tell it to sit. And if it does what you want, it gets a reward. If it doesn't, nothing happens. No punishment, but also does get the validation. Now, if you get in the habit of petting with a purpose, every time you pet your dog, it increases its respect for you as an authority figure. It boosts its self-esteem or confidence because it's earning that affection. It helps it practice basic obedience, which is listening to you. And number 4, it makes your pets more valuable. you're not giving these things out willy-nilly. You have to earn them. And so because something is not as available, it's more valuable. It truly becomes a gift. It'll take you about 2 months, 3 months to get in a habit of doing it, but every time you do, petting your dog becomes a micro dog training session. Now, we also talked about passive training. Passive training is basically waiting for your dog to organically offer the behavior and then rewarding them within that 2-second window. So every time your dog comes to you, pet it and say come when you didn't ask it. Every time it sits down, pet it and say sit. Every time it lays down, pet it and say crash. Goes to the dog bed, call it Jamaica or Venezuela or whatever you want to call it. When it eats, say pork chop, pizza, meatball, come up with a different command name for each dog to eat. When it drinks water, say happy hour. And so these are, remember to use fun command words. Remember, dogs can read facial expressions. One of the things I forgot to mention, make a list of the official command words and then say vocabulary to each other if you're saying a different version of the word. So if somebody comes up to me, so if I'm saying come here, somebody says vocabulary, I'm like, thank you, come. It's much easier if we make dogs only listen to one word than a whole bunch of them. All right, so passive training is just waiting for the dog to offer you the behavior that you want and then rewarding in that 2-second window. I call it celebrating the things, and that's the watchword we use. So if I'm standing here watching TV and then somebody says celebrate, I look at the dog and I start petting the dog as soon as I can within 2 seconds. Then I look at what the dog's position and I say whatever is standing. I said come. If it's sitting, laying down, those are pretty obvious. Name all your individual toys. So that way, if your dog brings you something, a little, maybe a zebra, and she's poking it at you, maybe call it Ref. Come up with a funny name for each one. And so now you can name all of your individual toys, your dog bed. When your dog pees or poops, say business or splat or potty or whatever your word is when they're active doing it. So you're waiting for the dog to do these things on its own and then rewarding them afterwards. That makes them more inclined to want to do those things when you ask them for them, and also for the dog to actually offer those behaviors proactively to get your attention. So use the watchword celebrate quite a bit. It'll really help. One rule, this is what I forgot earlier, one rule that you want to do is make sure that you are eating something before you feed the dogs. And I would have the dogs outside the kitchen or outside the area. You eat something. What I usually like to do is I put the food in both bowls, put the bowls down about 10 feet or more away from the dogs. Then I eat something in 5 more bites. Then I'm going to invite Murphy to come over. When Murphy's eating, Ollie's not allowed to be in the room. We watch Murphy. Don't let him go to Ollie's bowl. I think they eat out of one bowl now, but I would get them both separate bowls. And then once Murphy's done, even if he didn't eat all his food, once he stops eating, engaging for longer than like a minute or two, I pick up his bowl, dump it empty, put the empty bowl back down, and then he has to leave the kitchen. Then we invite the other dog to come in, and then Ollie comes in. When Ollie's eating, Murphy's not allowed to be in the kitchen. So both dogs see you kind of having their back and also preventing the other dog from coming and sweating them, and so it helps them have more, be more relaxed. I have a video on structured feeding is what I call it on my website, so you can go there to follow that, to figure out how to do that. I describe it to you, but if you have questions, make sure you message me or if the video doesn't explain it for you. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Murphy! I think they might have actually gotten let in because I don't hear any scruffling out there. So now if you have any questions for these things, make sure you message me. If I don't hear from you, I assume that means everything's going great. So I don't care how long it is after the session. I've got thousands of videos and things I can share with you, but you have to let me know that you have questions. So don't hesitate to call or text me. All right, well, this is Murphy and Ollie's Roadmap to Success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog, only sometimes you mean it.